All right. Hi, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Your company is called Raw Dog Barkery, which is a great title. And I had a look at your website. This is really high end dog and cat food, right?
Yeah, it's all in some cases above human grade. It's in a lot of cases is organic, but everything that we make was intended for a human plate.
Okay, so I could eat it.
Yes, and many of my staff members do, and they eat all the profits.
Is that what you serve for lunch? Is that what they get for lunch?
Well, in my house, the chicken breast product that we have, we eat that at least once a week. So it's the exact same chicken breast that we make dog treats out of.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I think that's great. So you've also got the Bull Pet Shop. So you're a co-owner of pet shops as well as the owner of the food products manufacturing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they all fall under the umbrella of what is the kind of the parent company is What's in the Bowl Enterprises. And 6 years ago, my wife and I started What's in the Bowl Pet Shop, and we are now looking at opening our third location. But right from the beginning, we were making our own pet treats, and it really started to. A lot of our distributors were very attracted to our products, and we started to make them for other pet stores, and we're actually now manufacturing for other pet food companies as well.
Is your the Bull Pet shops, are they selling just exclusively your products or is it everything?
It's a independent neighborhood pet store, so we sell very high end pet food and supplies and supplements, and provide nutritional consultation to pet parents.
I was curious if you've had any people from the Westminster contact you.
Well, it is interesting because Rumor, a German Shepherd, actually came from the German Shepherd Club in a town just next to us. And so we have some of Rumor's offspring that come into the store now, but we've never been contacted by Westminster. They have some pretty big sponsors.
They do. They have some huge sponsors, but it's always an interesting show to watch. I love watching that.
We
Yeah.
do too.
So you have three golden retrievers, is that correct?
We do. We have three golden retrievers, Bonnie and Clyde and Stella, and we also have a bunch of barn cats. But they're, uh, I'm amazed how well they're doing given how cold it is here.
Also on your bio, it says that you were a psychotherapist and a former FBI special agent. Were you one of those ones that would create the psychological profile for serial killers? And
No, I really wasn't. And it sounds much more glamorous than it really was. But I spent a lot of my career as a psychotherapist, and I applied to the bureau, and it was ironically one of the most boring jobs I've ever had in my life.
you did that though for 30 years, or were you the psychotherapist for 30 years?
So I've actually spent the bulk of my career as an executive in healthcare companies, and it was we have four kids, and three of our four kids were all getting married within 18 months of each other, and we wanted to be there as they started their families. So we moved back to Wisconsin because I my job took us all over Texas, North Carolina, Nebraska, and we came home and opened up a very small 500 square foot pet store. And I really thought my wife would run the store and I'd have to get a job, but it's been very successful. So I didn't have to get a job.
Oh, well, I'm happy to hear that. I'm also happy to hear that you're making very high end dog food because I know that some of the commercial dog food, and I'm not going to name specific brands, but it's not good ingredients. There's a lot of stuff in there that you really don't want to be feeding your dog.
No, and actually, I have a podcast called Exploring Cat and Dog Nutrition, and one of the things we talk about in that podcast is I think if people look on pet food labels, and for example, if the first ingredient is chicken or beef, we all have a vision in our mind of what that looks like, and the reality is that most pet food plants, chicken or beef or whatever protein. Chicken, for example, arrives at those dog food plants in a rail tanker car. And it's not what you really think it is.
A rail tanker car. You mean something akin to that they would haul gasoline in?
Correct, correct. It does come as a liquid. And in a lot of dog foods, if the first ingredient is a whole food, and I think somewhere in our lives, no one can really pinpoint where they learned how to read labels. We believe that if the first ingredient is a whole food, that's the majority of what's in that product. And because pet food's not regulated, what they don't tell you is they determine the volume of what's in a package of pet food, whether that's actual food or a treat, before it's cooked to 700 degrees. And if you think about even if you bought a beautiful organic chicken or grass-fed beef on the grill and heated it internally to 700 degrees, you would lose 50 to 75% of the volume. So in pet food, it's always the first dry product on a label that's the majority of what's in that product.
What does meat byproduct actually mean? Because you see that on everything, but I don't know what it actually is.
Well, and the interesting thing about the pet food industry is if you want to know the official definition of, for example, meat byproduct, since there's no government regulation, you actually have to buy the definitions through an organization called AFCO. And basically, meat byproduct is going to be, it could be a variety of different things. At best, it would be the trimmings of meat that wasn't intended for human consumption. At worst, it could literally be dead, diseased animals, rendered meats. It could really mean anything that wasn't intended for human consumption. And rendered meats can be pretty nasty.
So you said that the pet food industry is not regulated, so they do not fall under the FDA?
No, the FDA has no regulations for pet food companies. They get involved, of course, if a human or animal gets sick, but there's no legislation, there are no regulations or government regulations for pet food companies. And it's interesting, prior to 1999, there was some remnants of legislation that were deleted in 1999. And basically the remnants of that legislation actually said at that time that it was illegal to put any substances that would be considered toxic to human beings in pet food. And Congress basically made the decision to delete that regulation.
I know that I've been told by my vet that paracetamol is toxic to dogs, but we take it, frequently for headaches and things like that. So if they actually put something like that in the pet food, there would be no legal recourse for people?
Not really. In fact, some of the more recent recalls that have taken place where the FDA has got involved, there was actually euthanasia drug found in some very large commercial canned foods. And that sounds awful, but the curious thing is you have to ask yourself, what kind of animals are euthanized? Anything that is meant for human consumption, they're slaughtered, so they're usually electrocuted. And dogs, cats, horses, or sick animals are euthanized. So the assumption is that those types of animals ended up in the pet food supply. If an animal dies on a farm from a disease or an accident, that animal still has a value, and you can ask any farmer. They're still able to sell that animal. And the problem with that, of course, is that they're sick. But the other problem is that animal has always been worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and farmers will do almost anything to keep that animal alive so they can sell them. And what happens to an animal that's being kept alive, or a diseased animal? They're full of antibiotics, they're full of all kinds of pharmaceuticals, and those animals literally are not, the FDA prohibits them, or the USDA prohibits them from being made for human consumption, but there's nothing prohibiting them from making them into pet food.
So in some dog food, it could actually contain dog.
It's possible. And, to get the analysis, and owning 2 pet stores, we've had some recalls that have taken place, and we've had organizations contacting us asking us if we had any of those recalled products because they wanted them for their own analysis. But the idea of rendered meats, rendering plants, I remember passing by a rendering plant in Texas, and there were mountains of, this is all outside in a parking lot or a yard, and it just mountains of meat, and that could be animals, it could be roadkill, it could be cats and dogs. And that's not even the worst of it. That same mountain of dead animals and rotting carcasses were if the sun was shining right, you would see it kind of move from all the rats. And then one day I saw an exterminator, throw a smoke bomb into that big pile of rotting meat. And that whole pile of rotting meat was shoveled up by a front end loader and dumped into a grinder and was literally probably sold to a pet food company.
Really encourages me to become a vegetarian when you hear things like that.
The interesting thing is, I think almost every integrative veterinarian I've ever met, or holistic veterinarian, they're all vegetarians, but they recommend feeding raw meat to cats and dogs because they're carnivores.
And there's an organization out there, which I think is ridiculous, called Vegan Cat. And, it's just cruel to the animal. This is what they're supposed to eat.
Well, absolutely. And the reality is cats are considered obligate carnivores, meaning they really don't have the ability to get nutrients from plant matter. The only level of grain or plant matter that a cat is capable of processing would be found in the belly of a prey animal, and it would already be partially digested for them. And if they're eating a mouse or even a small rat, there's not a lot in, they don't eat that much. So they're really not intended to be eating any plant matter.
Well, a friend of mine showed me their website, and he said, take a look at the pictures of the cats that they have on. They all look like they came from a house with a gas leak. And they really did. They were undernourished. They looked awful, these cats. And I really think that these people should have been taken for animal cruelty.
I agree. And the reality is, most people would never consider feeding meat to a horse or a cow. And, everyone accepts the fact that snakes don't eat grain. But for some reason, we all believe that our carnivore dogs and cats should be, that they shouldn't be eating all these starches. And the reality is, most food that is for cat and dog food that comes from a bag is going to be at least 40% starch. So it's not biologically or species appropriate for them.
Okay, well, that's a great segue because we've got just a couple minutes, and I wanted to hit on your second talking point. It says, what does biologically and species appropriate mean? I have never seen dog food that was species specific. It usually just says puppy and adult, and then large or small dog, right? But I don't see food that's specific for poodles or German shepherds or retrievers, or your food is?
Actually, species just refers to, for example, for dogs, dogs are a species that is classified by science as a carnivore. And if you look at a bag of food, and I encourage everyone listening, if they have a bag of cat or dog food, look at the back and add up the percentages on the back of the bag and subtract from 100. And you're going to find that at least 40% of the ingredients on that label are missing. And that's because probably that 40% is all starch. And when we say biologically or species appropriate, we literally mean that dogs and cats shouldn't be eating starch. They should be eating meat.
And I see what you mean.
Okay. Yeah, people feed out of a bag because it's cheap and convenient, not because it's the best thing for them to eat.
I was confusing species with
different breeds.
Yeah, okay.
That's good feedback for us because we use that term a lot.
I think people would make that mistake, and I don't know, because when I read that, I thought, oh, they have different kinds of foods for poodles than they do for retrievers.
And the interesting thing about dogs and cats, and especially dogs, is the digestive tract in a Chihuahua versus a Saint Bernard or any other dog breed, their digestive tracts are relatively identical. So the idea that you would have a breed specific, and there are foods out there that are breed specific, are it kind of doesn't make sense to us. In fact, we really don't even promote puppy food or senior food. For most of our lives, or if you look at any other species on the planet, there's not a formulated diet for them for what age they are or what breed they are. We just do that for cats and dogs because it makes a lot of money for the pet food companies.
Sean, we do have to wind this down. Can you give out your website?
Sure. Our website is www.rawdogbarkery.com.
Okay, and all your food is available for online ordering?
Yes, it is.
Thanks so much for coming on and enlightening me with and everybody else, because I think that a lot of people have questions about their pets, and this was good information. Thanks again.
Great. And if anyone wants to reach out to us and give us a call or email us, we're available to do that.